Welcome to another episode of me reviewing highlights. As always, I'll include direct links to the specific passages within the description as well as links to the books themselves. So, with that, let's get started. The first one from Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? Not all low mood is unidentified dehydration, but when dealing with mood, it is essential to remember that it's not all in your head. It's also in your body state, your relationships, your past and present, your living conditions and lifestyle. It's in everything you do and don't do, in your diet and your thoughts, your movements and memories. How you feel is not simply a product of your brain. The author is actually starting from a topic where a lot of times when we're actually feeling, when we're feeling little low, it's a common cause is dehydration. It's not only in our brains. It's not like sometimes we just attribute that this is all in my head, but it's not always just there. Sometimes it's the physical body as well, and we have to pay attention to that. And so it kind of sums up that it's not just in our head. It's also like it's like a summation of everything that's happening to us, events around us, and also things that are happening within our bodies. So yeah, not all low mood is dehydration, but then a lot of it is. So it's important to kind of distinguish, and and it actually gets quite hard, especially when you are on low energy or something. It gets quite hard to understand or quite hard to classify what exactly a problem is. But it becomes important at that time, and it gets better with habit, like anything. Once we get used to the process of questioning ourselves, what is it really that's causing me to act this way? That's how we build up a habit. Another book over here, which is on my list, I've not read it yet. It's the Extended Mind, and that also in that the author covers a lot, like how brains are not just, or how our mind is not just limited to our brain. It's actually like a whole summation of whatever our body feels. So, yeah, with that, let's move on to hidden potential. Collective intelligence begins with individual creativity, but it doesn't end there. Individuals produce a greater volume and varied and variety of novel ideas when they work alone. That means that they come up with more brilliant ideas than groups, but also more terrible ideas than groups. It takes collective judgment to find the signal in the noise. So in this chapter, the author is kind of drawing this, that how do you make a team greater than the sum of its parts? So just because there is a team, and like we are providing a place to everybody, doesn't mean that individual creativity is squashed. Quite the opposite, in fact. In a well-run team, well-formed team, in a balanced team, everybody's opinions are heard, and they are considered on meritable ground. And of course, the author goes into a lot of depth in this book. Actually, it goes, the author covers this in other books as well, his earlier books, Originals and Think Again. So yeah, it's just that individuals they do come up with highly creative ideas, but in teams, it can things like, the something that the individual had not considered in the first place, those gaps get filled. Or like the author says over here, that also means they come up with more terrible ideas. And it takes collective judgment. In Six Working Types of Genius, there is this skill called, or this in that the author calls it a genius. So that working genius of discernment. So and that happens in groups. So like, while the creative ideas come from the first two geniuses, wonder and invention, discernment is also very important in a team, and that's something that only team can bring. Uh, you know. So with that, moving on, the earn life. Motivation is a strategy, not a tactic. Motive is the reason we act in a certain way. Motivation is the reason we continue acting that way. It's the difference between impulsively going running on a sunny afternoon to release some restless energy, and running 6 days a week, month after month, because you want to get fit or lose weight or train for a race. I am getting the feeling that I've talked about this before. Um, but I think, let's cover the first part of it, because I think most of the highlight is pretty clear. That motivation is a strategy, not a tactic. That it's not like a one-time tactic that that you just employ. and get done with something that you want to do, that's not really motivation. It's the reason, it's kind of the why behind things, and that's not something that, okay, no, I'm just doing this for now and it's over. um, and then, yeah, a specific task may be a tactic, but motivation is itself is not the reason why you're doing this. It's the why. And that's why the author gives this example that, okay, when you're impulsively going running on a Sunday afternoon, you're just like, okay, you're feeling restless. It's a temporary reason. There's no larger why behind it. You just felt like you wanted to do something and you did it. Whereas, compare it to like a strategy where you, for example, where you want to get fit or lose weight, then you actually have to uh, build up a schedule for that. And so, yeah, that's where motivation comes in. And like, as I'm saying all of this, I think I strongly recall that I did this. I covered this very recently. 7.5 lessons about the brain. As neurons change conversation partners, a single neuron can take on different roles. For example, your ability to see is so intimately tied to an area of the brain called the occipital cortex that the area is routinely called the visual cortex. However, its neurons routinely carry information about hearing and touch. So this is one of the passages where the author is kind of pointing out that, like, I mean, we see our brain in this compartments, that, okay, this is the visual cortex and this is the um, what was the I'm like forgetting all the different parts of the brain right now. So it's it's helpful to kind of visual, like, to kind of identify that, okay, there are certain areas of brains which are kind of um, more involved in a particular activity, but the neurons themselves are quite flexible. They can reconfigure themselves depending on who they are talking to. So, like the author gives an example over here. Then move on. The earned life. Empathy's greatest utility is how effectively it reminds us to be present. So I don't remember the context where this appears. It's just one line, right? And but what does this mean to me? It's it's for us to be uh, like, what does it mean to have empathy? That we are we are paying attention to our surroundings, to the people around us. We are paying attention to what's happening in the moment. In other words, we are present in the present. So empathy, this whole drive of focusing on empathy and everything, it this is one of the side effect, a positive side effect, that it like, if nothing else, it reminds us to be present. um, and I think that's the key part of it anyway, because we human beings are anyway wired to be compassionate. It's just that I mean, yeah, I'm not like, I'm not trying to put a blanket statement over that, okay, this is always how it works. But chances are that if you are paying attention to your surroundings, to what's happening around you, really paying attention, you would anyway feel compassionate towards whatever you are witnessing, right? So just the act of being present, sometimes that's enough to drive compassion, drive empathy. So I think it's the key part of empathy anyway, being in the present. Going on, clear thinking. Your environment isn't just your physical surroundings, it also includes people. Sometimes it's hard saying no to someone. We are wired in a way that makes us want to be liked by others, and we're afraid that saying no to someone will make them like us less. Saying no to someone repeatedly can be even more difficult. We might say no when our friend offers us a sugary beverage after a workout one day, but if he does it 3 days in a row, if but if he does it 3 days in a row, we cave. That's only human. So the book is about building mental systems. I think the author has actually another book on similar, like on the same topic. Sorry, on the topic of mental systems. So um, the author is stressing that we have to remember that it's not just that um, um, like our motivations, our habits, the way we build habits. It's just that, okay, it's like, it's based on the environment. And it's not just our physical surroundings, but it's also the people. And kind of like, a repeated, how do I put this? Like a repeated offer, so, such as the example over here, somebody offering you a sugary beverage 3 days in a row, you will eventually cave. You feel bad saying no repeatedly to something like that. So that's only human, and that's where clear thinking comes into the play. It comes into play over here. That there are, of course, like a lot of models over here. We discussed one thing, that sometimes it's better to have rules. In a previous video, we discussed this, that rules are better than what is the alternative, like a behavior of some sort. That if you have a rule, then people actually respect that. Okay, that it's a rule, compared to a preference, that okay, I prefer not to have a sugary beverage right now. That's a preference, and eventually you cave. But whereas if you say that, okay, no, as a rule, I don't drink sugary beverages anytime or after workouts or whatever your rule is, and people respect that. People don't find it in themselves to kind of force you to do something anymore. So with that, let's move on to the earned life. Time has taught me that you can't color success only in the bold hues of desire, talent, intellect, and self-belief. You need support, as well as a receptive market for each of your specific tasks or goals. Right. This is really a vague memory. The author actually goes on to talk about what kind of support you need, and it like he kind of builds it in a model where success, of course, it's driven by this by our self attributes such as desire, talent, intellect, and self belief, but also by the community support. And I'm forgetting the model, of course. I think I should look it up. It was quite important. I think it was kind of the essence of the whole book. In fact, that um, the earned life, you can't have an earned life without support. Sometimes we not sometimes, we have this in certain cultures. We have this kind of mindset that um, we are a self-made man. Like we have done everything ourselves, and that's not quite true. The author goes on to show that we have always uh, uh, you've always reached where you are with varying degrees of support. Somebody might have used a lot of support, somebody not so much, but nobody can do anything without some support. And that is why it's very important to put it into a model of how do you look at your life, and how do you um, kind of think about it as being earned or not. Moving on to the well-lived life. In today's busy culture, it can be hard to find our own right way. We often want to be successful in everything we do, and we're encouraged to judge our success from the outside, whether we are good at doing something or whether it makes us money or brings us prestige. But in truth, happiness has much more to do with how we feel than anything else. When we try to follow everyone else, do what we think we should, or create an identity for ourselves that doesn't work, we suffer. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's something that we have been talking about. I kind of like the previous highlight kind of points towards this anyway. That with all this influence around us, like one of the highlights we just discussed little earlier, that our environment is not just our surroundings; it's also the people. With everything that surrounds us, with our environment as it is, with our culture as it is right now, it's very difficult to find out, okay, what is our own right way. Where is my individuality over here? And many people, it's kind of funny that many people think of individuality, and they talk about individuality, and they do something that's they just repeat what a cool person does. um, or the rebel. It's not their own true way, the purpose, or it's just that based on the surroundings, what they think their purpose is. um, and in it's yeah, I'm not really sure what else to talk about over here, apart from what the author already repeats, that happiness is more about how we feel, and comparing ourselves to our environment and everything. That's really something that comes down as I should do something, right? Moving on, the earned life. We are more likely to comply with the recommended course of action when failure to do so results in extreme pain or punishment, either physical, financial, or emotional. I think this is also one of those highlights. I have discussed this before, and it's pretty straightforward that any recommended course of action, if you actually have a meaningful um, um, negative, I mean, like the word here is punishment, and that's fine. That's a good word for what the author is trying to say. But if you don't want to think of it as punishment, think of it as a negative incentive, and that is what uh, drives drives any action really. We are, like the author says, we are more likely to comply with something if there is a negative incentive, if there is a punishment of any kind of any sort, either physical, financial, or emotional. So yeah, moving on, getting things done. It never hurts to ask the why question. Almost anything you're currently doing can be enhanced and even galvanized by more scrutiny at this top level of focus. So we just talked about this, having a why of any action that you're doing. It's very important to have a why, because if you don't have a why, it's more likely it is short lived. You're going to do it once and then you're going to be done with it. Whereas if you ask the why question, if you ask yourself why you're doing something, first of all, if you don't get a strong reason why, you may question yourself, is it even worth doing? But the second thing is, if you can answer it, it will further galvanize that. It'll provide you that motivation. What we discussed a little earlier. It will provide you that motivation to keep you going. And I think with that, we are at the end of our highlights today. And at 17 minutes, it's not that bad. So, you all have a good week and a happy new year, of course. Take care.